Morning everyone, hope everyone's well and welcome to today's video. So today I'm going to give you 4 of the main reasons on why I think property is one of the best, if not the best, asset class to invest in. So whether we're in an economic downturn or a rising market, property can work for you as long as you know what to do and what to look out for. So like I say, today we're going to go through 4 of the main reasons on why I think it is one of the best asset classes and how it's worked for me over the last 12 years and stood the test of time. So without further ado, let's get started with number 1. Okay, so the first one we're going to cover then is passive income. But what is passive income? What does it mean? Well, there's lots of different definitions online, but it essentially means an income that you derive from something where you're not actively involved every single month. So when you've got a job, you go to your job 9 to 5 and you get paid at the end of that month. Whereas with passive income, it essentially means if you're not there, the cogs are still ticking and it's still earning you money. Now, a lot of people might think that's a bit too good to be true, but with your investments, if you do them correctly and you invest in property correctly, then that can happen. Now, for those that watch your channel regularly, you'll know that we are realists and we also speak the truth. So nothing's ever completely passive, and that's one thing I really want to make clear. But I've certainly found property to be the most passive thing that I've invested in. And so there's likely going to be 2 scenarios when you do invest in property, which is you're either going to manage yourself or you might use an agent or somebody else that you know to manage the property for you. And even in those circumstances, obviously if you manage them yourself, you've got to know what you're doing, do it correctly, and actually be doing all the paperwork, making sure you're organising repairs, collecting the rent. So there's lots of things that, although it's not completely passive, it certainly takes less time than if you had a sort of normal job. If you've got somebody managing the property, again, it's never completely passive because you've still got to sometimes check in with your agent, manage those. If there's problems, you've got to react there. But I've certainly found over the last 12 years that it's an asset class that, like I say, whilst not completely passive, because what is, it's certainly one of them, if not the most passive ones I've found, and meant that you can actually get that income every month for not having to put in 40 hours a week. And then also, once the property's bought, it essentially is paying you for life then, as long as the tenant's paying. So that's a big benefit and something that really attracts people to property in the first place. So the first one, like I say, is passive income. And that's a great reason to invest in property. Okay, so the next one to mention is capital growth. Now, when I started, I got into property and I thought I was only really thinking about capital growth because, we all know that property usually doubles every 7 to 10 years. There's obviously been a huge recession in 2008, and so that's not always the case. But as a general rule, over time, that's what happens. And so I was just thinking, buy some properties, 10 years from now, they'll be worth double. Brilliant. But obviously, I didn't know at the time about cash flow, about the passive income. So that came into play. And if you've watched some of our other videos, you know how much we champion passive income and the cash flow. And that really keeps your business going every month. But capital growth is obviously the icing on the cake and something that is really good that we get in the future. So it's something to think about, but obviously not something to rely on. And then once you've got your capital growth over that period of time, there's different things you can do then. So a lot of people might reinvest that into something else, or they might pay down debts. And so we're going to do a separate video completely on what I did and my story and how I built my portfolio and how I leveraged and used that money. But that's essentially, when you've got that capital growth, you've got loads of different options. Some people might even take the equity out of that property and pay it off their own home, obviously reducing their costs monthly. So there's loads of different options, and capital growth, if you stick in it for the long term, is something you're really going to benefit from in the future. So number 2, capital growth. Great thing to do with property. Okay, so I'm on to number 3 now, which I briefly mentioned earlier, but number 3 is leverage, and we're going to go into that in more detail now. So the beauty with property is different to something like stocks and shares, as an example, where if you bought stocks and shares, to get £100,000 worth of value out of that, you'd have to actually put in £100,000. Whereas with property, you can buy an asset worth £100,000, but often only put in 25, sometimes 20% deposit. So you can actually leverage your money a lot more than you can with other asset classes. And that's a really, really powerful thing to do, because then it means obviously in the future, if you then get the capital growth we talked about before, that means you can then use the asset you've got to lend against to buy other assets. And that's how people then build up portfolios over time. So leverage is a really powerful thing, and it's something I used in the early days and I'm still using now, just in a slightly different way. But it means that people can actually get, like we said, the benefit of a lot more property by only putting in 25%, 20% of the value at times. So leverage, really powerful thing, a reason to really invest in property and can sort of turbocharge your growth and your wealth. So finally then, I want to come on to the last benefit that I want to talk about. And it's important to say as well, this is an exhaustive list. So it's not that these are the only benefits to property, because I also believe that it can be a lot less risky in a lot of cases as well. But the last one I want to talk about in this particular video is property's versatility. So I just believe it's a lot more versatile than other asset classes as well. So if we come back onto the stocks and shares we talked about earlier, if you put 10,000 into stocks and shares, and for example those stocks and shares go down, then that money's tied up and there's not an awful lot you can do until they go back up. Whereas with property, if you put your 10,000 into a property and the market dips, and you've still got the rental income, you've still got the passive income that we spoke about earlier coming in each month. So I just believe it's very versatile, and there's a lot of other things you can do as well, such as buying and selling, adding value to the house. And so I think that really helps it be one of the best asset classes. And you've also then always got the asset, which is a real big benefit with the UK, because we've got such a housing shortage. So hopefully today's video has shown you the main benefits that property can provide. If you found the video useful, then if you could subscribe and like as well, that'd be great. It helps the channel out. And as people that have watched our videos before know, that we aim to provide good practical content for people looking to start out in property. So like I say, I hope you found it useful. Appreciate you watching, and I'll speak to you soon.